Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. I think we can go ahead and get started. This is a joint meeting of the Manitou Springs City Council and the Manitou Springs Planning Commission. It's April 27th, 2021. Again, it's a work session. We're here for one purpose tonight. That's to discuss the Manitou Springs Subdivision and Zoning Code Project with the and it going forward here. This is a year-long project. Okay, so I'd like to call this meeting to order, and we will take a city council roll call. And as we do that, I think it'd be good if we maybe just beyond saying here or present, we state our names so that anyone in the planning commission or the audience who doesn't recognize will have that opportunity. I know we do have our names up, but that'll help people get adjusted to our voice as well. And then if we could go ahead and Alan, if you would do a roll call for the planning commission, that'll give us a chance to familiarize ourselves with voices and make sure people can talk and hear. And then we'll go for the approval of the agenda. So with that, would the city clerk please call the roll?
Yes, city council members. Judith Chandler.
Present. Judith Chandler, at-large councilwoman.
John Shada.
Yes, present.
Julie Wolf. Where did she go?
Yeah, she was here. Let's go on. Let's see if we can get her back. If you would continue, please, Judy.
Okay, sure. Steve Brimner. My understanding is, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Bremner called in. He's going to be about half an hour late.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Nancy Fortune
Nancy Fortune, Ward 2 representative.
and Mayor John Graham.
John Graham. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we had Councilwoman Julie Wolf on a bit ago, and then we apparently lost the connection. So let's go ahead and do a roll call for the Planning Commission. Alan,
Okay,
please.
I'm Alan Dowitz, the chair of the Planning Commission. Mike Casey,
Mike Casey, present.
David Armstrong, Carrie Storm,
Carrie Storm, present.
Tip Reagan,
Tip Reagan, present.
and Gloria Latimer. Okay, Gloria, maybe she's stepped away.
Here I am, Alan. Thank you. Gloria Latimer, present.
Okay, I think I got everybody. If I missed anybody, yell at me. Let's see.
And Gloria, we could hear you there, but we can't see it. Can you display your video, please? There we are. Thank you, Gloria. Okay, and I see it looks like we have Councilor Wolf, out there logged in. Julie, could you show your display, the video, turn your video on, and do a roll call, please?
God's sakes, what the fuck is wrong with this?
Jesus.
Julie, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Julie, you're muted.
Yeah, Julie, you're muted and your video is not displayed, but you otherwise appear to be logged in. So, could you acknowledge if you can hear me? Bear with us, everybody. We're just working a little technical glitch. It seems to be the present flavor of democracy.
Okay.
Okay, Julie, now we can see you. Can you
Fine.
just say- Okay, there's, Julie's with us now, so.
Sorry.
All right. No, that's okay. We're good. All right. The next item of business then is approval of the agenda. I'd ask for a motion and a second from Manitou Council.
I move approval of the agenda.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Mr. Shada, seconded by Councilor Chandler. All Manitou City Council members in favor say aye and raise your hand, please. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on to the business of the night. The joint session with City Council and Planning Commission. And I believe we're going to start off with Christine Lowenberg to begin walking us through this. Christine?
Yes. Hi, thank you. Somehow Counselor Wolf always takes the words out of my mouth when we get going. But seriously, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We're really excited about tonight's joint session. The planning team and the entire consultant team have been really engaged and working diligently for almost 5 months behind the scenes to get us to this point. And so we're really looking forward to tonight's conversation and expect that this is really going to point us in the direction for the next few months. So during this joint session, we're going to talk a little bit about the purpose of our work, the results of the work so far, and how we're going to move forward. I believe either Melissa or Jen are going to be sharing their screen for a presentation tonight. I have also sent to everyone yesterday an email with instructions and a link to Menti. And Menti is polling software that we're going to use during this. It's a way to be interactive and engaged with all of you and collect some data and results. So with that, let's go ahead and we'll get started. So the purpose of our work, which is funded through a DOLA grant, as well as City of Manitou Springs matching funds, is to develop and implement a plan to improve our municipal zoning and subdivision regulations. We will ensure through this qualified teams efforts and very robust community engagement, an effective rewrite and reorganization of the code. So what I'd like to do right now, I think we could go to the first slide, is to introduce the key lead members of the project team. So what I'd like to do, I think I'll start with each of you and kind of scroll through, and if what they'll do is they'll take just a minute to introduce themselves, share a little bit about their role on this project, their team's role, and a little bit about their area of professional expertise. We want for everyone to really get a sense of who the team is and the depth of our team. So the screen you see in front of you has everyone there. So let's begin with Jennifer. Let's start with you and then work our way through the Logan Simpson team, and then go over to Mark, and Mark, let you work through the White and Smith team.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you all for having us this evening. We're really excited to talk through this code assessment with you. So I am Jennifer Gardner, the senior planner with Logan Simpson and the project manager of this project. And I have been leading the project and will continue to be leading the project and be a section author. We have many, as you can see on the screen, we have many team members involved in this project. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce the 3 members of our team on the bottom that are not here. We have Cameron Gloss, Jen Lovestick, and Kevin Small. Cameron is a senior planner as well that just recently joined our team and has a lot of code experience. Jen Lovestick is an architectural historian and helps us with a lot of the historic preservation pieces of codes. So given the historic nature of Manitou Springs, we have her on the team for anything that we need her for. And Kevin Small is our graphics representative. We have 3 or 4 graphics people within our staff, but Kevin is our primary code graphics producer. So with that, I think we'll pass it over to Bruce.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited about this meeting, and I am Bruce Meehan. I'm the contract manager to make sure that everything goes smooth. But I also am a planner for 25 years and one of the primary owners of Logan Simpson. And on that note, I'll turn it over to someone a lot younger than me, Melissa.
Hi there. My name is Melissa Ruth. I'm part of the Logan Simpson team and then the assistant project manager. So I've seen quite a few of you through the interviews. And then I also kind of manage the public engagement side and author a lot of the sections. So thanks for having us tonight.
And Mark?
All right, thank you. I'm Mark White. I'm a senior partner with White and Smith LLC. We are organized as a law firm. That's why we're in black and white and not those vivid colors you see with the planning firm. And also urban planners. So that Tyson Smith is my partner in Charleston. I'm in Kansas City. Sorry about that, but we do a lot of work in Colorado. I, in fact, went to high school in Colorado, so we're very familiar with how things work there. And then Kelly Cousineau is in our Charleston office, and Reese Wilson is a planner with our firm in Dallas. Reese is an urban planner who's helped us out a lot on several projects here in Colorado, and will help us research, do graphics. He's very skilled with graphics as well, and I'll help with code drafting, research that's needed, and otherwise I just take orders from Jen and Melissa.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you. We've got a pretty broad team with a broad skill set. And so it's been a pleasure the last 4.5 months or so to work with them in depth. So tonight in your packet, on page 4 of your council packet, we outlined the flow for this meeting. So the intent is that we are going to have a thorough presentation. We'll provide an opportunity for several points of group discussion throughout. We will have a wrap up towards the end, and that's very important because that will lead us into a very busy 8 to 10 months from this point. In your packet, as well as council packet on page 5, begins the draft assessment report, which has appendices added to that. So that allows readers, as well as the panelists on tonight's meeting, to really take a deep dive into the data. It provides in-depth information about each of the themed areas of focus that we are recommending and we'll talk about tonight. Page 40 of the council packet contains a detailed timeline that is month by month of what we're working towards. So far in our presentations, we've really kept the calendar at a high level, working in 2-month modules or presenting in 2-month modules. But this page 40 provides you a much more detailed timeline of what we're working towards. And we'll be keeping that up to date in real time following tonight's meeting, because there may be we may decide to move things around just a little bit based on the input from tonight, but we'll see how that goes. So tonight we'll be discussing stakeholder engagement a bit more in a later slide. But before we get to that, one of the areas that I would like to reference is an important area of engagement, and that will be the advisory committee. Throughout the process, we have asked that anyone interested in serving in this role to let us know. I've contacted each of the boards and commissions and solicited folks who are interested in participating, bless you, who are interested in participating in this role. And every group has offered someone, if not multiple someones, who's interested in participating in this, as well as we work through stakeholder interviews and survey takers, folks have had the opportunity to indicate they want to be a part of this. This is not something that anyone has to audition for. This is a group that we'll be working with following tonight's meeting. We'll schedule our first meeting and have some real direction for them. We will be engaging with them at a minimum of every 4 weeks to serve really as an advisory capacity. And then in between those 4 weeks, there will be some real meat and potato project opportunities so folks can get as in depth and engaged and in the weeds as they want to, or they can work at a higher level in an advisory role to us. We're really looking forward to that. So with that, I think we could go to the next slide. I may have covered what's on the next slide. And turn it over to Jen and the team. Yeah. Go ahead and go to the next slide. There we go. So we'll turn it over, I think at this point, to Jen, right?
Yep. Thank you, Christine.
You bet. Thanks.
So as Christine mentioned, we're going to go over a little bit of what we've heard. And again, as she mentioned, the details of this are all in the report, the assessment report, but we wanted to hit some highlights tonight just to make sure everybody is in the know. And then we'll go on and you'll have to bear with me a little bit, but we'll go through the highlights of the recommendations of each theme. So first off, we did launch a questionnaire at the beginning of the project, and we have received 211 responses to that questionnaire, which we feel is a good cross-section. I'll go into some of the responses from that questionnaire here shortly. We did engage with 38 different individuals for stakeholder interviews. And as you can see in your assessment report at the beginning, it details who we met with. That is outside of the boards and commissions. So the boards and commissions that we've met with add to that number, basically. And we, like I said, we've met with the with Planning Commission, City Council. I believe we are scheduled, we've met with the HAB board, the Housing and Advisory Board, and we are working on scheduling meetings with a couple of other boards. We've met with representatives from Parks and Recreation, Open Space, Urban Renewal. Historic Preservation is one of them that we are looking to schedule. And then the sustainability, it's a long environmental sustainability, something or other. We're working on getting a meeting set up with them still as well. We've met with developers, engineers, business owners, residents, a broad spectrum of longtime residents, short-term residents, and have heard some really, really great information. So again, and in addition, we've also met with staff. So we've met with staff from planning, public works, the clerk's office, finance, parking, code enforcement, and administration. Next slide. So key takeaways from that initial questionnaire, a little over half of the respondents were somewhat to very familiar with the codes. That's pretty helpful for us because oftentimes when we do these questionnaires, we get quite a few less that are familiar with the codes. So we're hearing from people who are familiar with the codes, have either developed under them or read portions of them and are familiar with the content. The key topics for overall improvement are simplifying the language and providing timeframes and checklists. So when we talk about that, I will say from doing our assessment, the current code is very lengthy. There's quite a bit of verbiage that could be simplified, brought down to more plain language for everybody to be able to understand. And with the application processes, the timeframes aren't as specific, and checklists are also often very helpful at the end of the project. They don't get codified typically, but we have been contracted to help provide checklists and kind of training on the code when the code is complete. So that will really help on the administration side of the project. The zoning and subdivision codes from the questionnaire, we asked a few questions on whether they are encouraging quality development. And as you can see here, the respondents said no, they're not encouraging quality development. And some of the highest priority topics that we heard from the questionnaire are parking requirements, short-term rentals, natural resource protections, attainable housing. And when I say rated high priority topics, we ask questions of what people think should be a high priority to dive a little deeper into as we go through the code update process. So these were the 4 that ranked the highest in that question. Next slide. And I should also mention that part of this process is taking the two different codes, the zoning and subdivision code. We've talked to you all before, so I'm sure you're aware of this, but just as a reminder, the two different titles, the zoning and subdivision title, the idea is to merge those into one, and one unified development code or land development code, and bring in the sign regulations from Title 15. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when I get to the recommendations. So from both stakeholder feedback and the questionnaire, we came up with 11 resulting themes. I believe the assessment report at the beginning says 10. It is 11. We figured that out. We must have miscounted the first time. But the 11 themes are to simplify administration and formatting, update definitions, clarify zone district standards, develop commercial and residential design standards, revise use-specific standards, update parking requirements, clarify the urban renewal area standards, incorporate sustainability, update the standards for development in natural and geologic hazard areas, update sign regulations, and revise non-conformity regulations. So, next slide. Actually, we could leave that slide up. We're going to go over an overview of all of them, but this might be nice to leave this slide up for reference. As I said, we're going to go through the recommendations. I hope you all have the assessment report in front of you, either in print format or on your screen, so you can follow along with me. But I just wanted to hit on some of the highlights and how we assess the code and how we got to where we are. So a lot of that is in the front end of the document, but just to kind of bring it to the forefront of the conversation, this stakeholder feedback and questionnaires and all the outreach that we did up until now really guided us into what was working and what was not with the current code. So that kind of gave us a foundation for what to look for. Then we go through the code top to bottom, line by line. We don't read every single word at this point, but we read many of them, and we kind of look through and we start to pair that up with our list of the resulting themes. And with this list of themes, we have a larger document, bulleted list of all the different things that we heard from the community. So we're able to pair those two up as we're reviewing, and that's what helps formulate these recommendations. So we're able to say, just in a quick glance at the code, it was pretty apparent that there are very little in the way of graphics and tables. Many more modern codes take a lot of the language and put it into tables and graphics to try to help explain concepts in, it works a little bit more effectively. So you'll see some graphics throughout our report, but so the recommendation summary for theme 1 of simplifying administration and formatting, there's several recommendations. One is combining the two titles that I spoke of earlier, removing any broken references in sections, updating existing graphics and adding new graphics, flow charts, tables. We find on the development side, adding flow charts that, like what you can see on page 9 of the document, really help the applicants understand what steps they need to go through to get their application approved. And then remove and clarify all vague language throughout the code. So anywhere where we talk about something that needs to be compatible, we try to work really hard to figure out what that compatibility is and spell it out rather than saying must be compatible. Any of the mays and shoulds, we try to change to shalls and musts so that it is a little bit more clear to interpret. The next section was general application procedure recommendations. Again, that's where the flow charts and tables come in. Separating the requirements for applicable plans from the application procedures. Clarifying the applicability of citizen participation plan and citizen participation report. I cannot say those. Clarifying the applicability of parks, trails, and open space report. So there were several reports listed throughout the code, and just clarifying what the intent is, where they need to come in, what their purpose is. Developing general application procedures. A lot of modern codes and the codes that we write have kind of this upfront application procedures. So we walk through general common steps. So, step 1 is your pre-application submittal or meeting. Step 2 would be your application submittal. Step 3 might be referral applications. So we walk through general steps and then we say which application needs which steps. Again, we will develop checklists when the code is all complete. Conditional use permit recommendations. The conditional use permits were very cumbersome. We heard quite a bit about them in our outreach. And so our recommendations would be to revise and clarify conditional use procedure and requirements to specify applicability of elements. To develop a temporary use permit for some of the applications rather than going through a full public hearing process. For example, food trucks, they require a conditional use permit currently and a full hearing process, whereas they are a temporary in nature. And so looking at more of a temporary use permit might make that process go a little smoother. One recommendation would be to develop a special use permit for those uses that are permanent and require review by city council, but maybe they don't need the conditional use. So there's many options that we can discuss with that. And all of these recommendations are simply that. They're recommendations. Some of these things I think are pretty straightforward and probably will want to move forward with. Some of them will require a bit more discussion on the staff level and with the public. Variances, we have heard that there are quite a few variance applications that run through Manitou Springs. So looking at revising setbacks and height allowances in each zone district to reduce the reliance on variances and revise parking requirements. Common conditions of approval, we'd like to assess codifying common conditions of approval just to make it clearer when you're approving processes. Text amendment recommendations, clarifying the text amendment procedures. And last but not least in this section is interpretation and enforcement recommendations. We'd like to develop a formal interpretation and application process. Updating definitions was the second theme. And this one's pretty straightforward. We update definitions in all the codes that we work on. They will be worked on throughout the whole update process. So as we're going through the process, we'll do many iterations. So there will be a first review to remove anything that is not applicable, not up to date, ensure that any standards that are in the definitions are removed, and so on and so forth. And as we move through the process, we will continue to kind of check back in with the definitions. And at the very end of the process, we do a final review and make sure that everything that needs to be defined is, and there aren't any definitions remaining that do not belong to the project any longer. Clarifying zone district standards. So looking at the zone districts, they were actually in fairly good shape. We did notice that there was not anything zoned industrial or manufacturing. So just an observation on our part. And we'd like to assess the need to develop any industrial or manufacturing zones. Reclassify the redevelopment overlay as a zone district. That was one thought that we had to try to help that our urban renewal area, if we chose to do that, to reclassify it as its own zone district rather than an overlay. I think there can be a little bit more meat to the standards. Develop an overall use table and include all defined uses in the use table. District standard recommendations, again, just providing tables and graphics to really help understand all the district standards. Revising setbacks and heights, we just need to look at all the setbacks and heights and ensure that they are sufficient so that we can try to reduce reliance on those variances. Incorporate a public art requirement. We've heard quite a bit about public art in the community and providing opportunity to display public art. And develop standards to address adjacent zone districts with different uses. So again, that kind of comes into that compatibility conversation. We heard quite a bit about this next theme, develop commercial and residential design standards. So we heard that design guidelines can incentivize new development while ensuring quality development that provides variety and visual interest. I think Manitou Springs already has some very distinct architectural styles in downtown and in the residential areas. But just to ensure that those styles and characters are preserved, it's a good idea to develop some design guidelines, especially for the downtown area. Anything that's outside of that historic district. So the historic district covers quite a bit of your downtown and quite a bit of your city in general. So anything that's outside of that, that's not already identified with design guidelines is what we would want to look at. And then the urban renewal area for sure. We've heard a lot about the urban renewal area and providing design guidelines, design standards, height regulations, setback regulations, even down to maybe some architectural style type menus to help kind of provide a vision and a character for that area. Revising the use specific standards. So this is all of your uses that are allowed in a zone district. We would like to consolidate all use specific standards into one chapter. Right now they're scattered throughout the codes. I'd like to expand the list of allowed home occupations. We've been hearing a lot about home occupations, especially during the pandemic, to ensure that uses such as a beauty salon that are lower impact, where you might only have one client at a time, looking at the potential to allow those home occupations. Additionally, there are federally protected uses such as telecommunications and sexually oriented businesses. Currently, your wireless communications is it just needs an update. And Mark is our rockstar telecommunications update person. And as he would say, the federal regulations are changing all the time. So we just try to catch up to them and do our best to get them in the best place that we can. The sexually oriented businesses, currently, it appears that it is an allowed use, but the restrictions make it so that it can't actually be placed within the city. So just looking at those regulations and trying to figure out how we can make that work. Attainable housing is probably one of the hottest topics on the market right now in every community we work in. So the primary recommendation is just looking to remove any regulatory barriers to provisions of attainable housing. Just to make sure that, if someone does want to build something that is truly attainable, they have the resources available to do that. Explore incentives for attainable housing and mixed use development. Providing more mixed use opportunities, infill opportunities are one way to help that attainable housing issue. Explore permitting conversion, or explore the permitting of conversion of hotels into residential uses. That one I think was going to require a little bit more digging and conversations with the community. It's definitely something that is being done across the country currently, but just need to look into ensuring that you still have enough hotel stock and can get that attainable housing at the same time. And then developing ADU regulations. We've heard quite a bit about development of ADU regulations and tiny home regulations. Looking at vacation rentals, so your short-term rentals, basically just assessing the need for more stringent regulations and developing criteria for approval of vacation rentals. We have heard a fair bit about vacation rentals, pros and cons. There's quite a few people we heard from that do have vacation rentals and would like them to stay. And I think they're a great resource. So just looking at making sure that we aren't, that we're still providing enough long-term housing. Landscape standard recommendations, there really is not a lot. There's not one section, consolidated section in the current code for landscaping and buffers. So the primary recommendation on this would be to develop a section or a subsection that would be dedicated to landscape and buffering standards. Promoting green infrastructure through that section, looking at on-site detention requirements, developing screening requirements for garbage and refuse, and stronger fire mitigation standards, as well as tree protection and tree mitigation standards. We heard quite a bit from the community about tree preservation. And we have several communities that we have worked in, namely Fort Collins. City of Fort Collins has a fantastic tree preservation program. It's not too arduous, and it's anything above, I believe, 6-inch caliber. So, it has to be a fairly substantial tree to qualify. And if you plan to remove that tree, you have to mitigate it at a certain rate. So fences and retaining walls kind of go hand in hand with landscaping. And again, just need to dedicate a section to fences and walls and specify dimensional standards and develop graphics to illustrate those. Okay, parking requirements. This is always a big topic in all the communities we work in. And in Manitou Springs, it was related more to downtown. And looking at minimum parking requirements to reduce street congestion. And you'll see in the, let's see, the parking standards. So our recommendations are to assess the feasibility of our alternative parking management strategies, such as shared parking, on-site versus off-site requirements. What happens in a lot of downtown areas is there's just not a lot of land to meet the parking requirements. So if we can look at ways to offset that parking requirement into an off-site, publicly owned site, that's what a lot of communities are moving towards. So revise the downtown parking standards as a parking maximum rather than a minimum. So rather than you need one space for every 300 square feet of floor area, we would say you just need to cap that out at a certain maximum. And update sidewalk terminology and standards per Plan Manitou recommendations. So I should have mentioned earlier, we take a lot of guidance from Plan Manitou as far as policy goes. So that's one of those nuggets right there. And then combine existing parking regulations into one chapter and add a landscape requirement. So when you have a large parking lot, you need to make sure that have adequate shade and landscaping to screen headlights and so on. Clarify the urban renewal area standards. Like we mentioned earlier, the urban renewal area, we heard quite a bit from stakeholders on. It's kind of one of the last areas of the city to have quite a bit of opportunity for development, infill, and redevelopment. And so one of the biggest things we heard about was height, building height. So we would like to assess the need to update the height allowances in the URA. That will require a bit more analysis. We'll need to do some graphics and some community outreach to see what seems comfortable to the community. Develop standards to incentivize mixed use development in the URA. I think it's a great area, and I think the plans in place currently would encourage that mixed use development. Look at revising the front setback requirements to match existing character. Clarify and expand the existing development standard incentive awards, and implement design standards specific to the URA. One of the concepts that we discussed with several stakeholders was that that Fountain Creek runs through the URA, and to embrace the creek in a way that rather than turning your back on it. So if you have a site that has the front on the road and the back on the creek, the architecture should reflect kind of a similar character to the front, and patios, outdoor dining, even connections to trails along the creek were all concepts that were discussed. Sustainability. So again, another topic that's very popular in the code world right now is integrating sustainability, and there's many ways that can be done. You'll see in your report, we have a couple tables that we borrowed from Golden, Colorado. Lakewood and Golden both have been doing this menu approach for quite a while. They've had the time to see how it works, tweak their tables to work even better. So I think a lot of communities use them as an example and kind of a standard to some degree. So one option that we could do with Manitou Springs code would be to take this menu approach. There can be some regulations that are standard and actual, you shall do this. And then there can be others that require a point system. So if you're required to get 25 points, and you can get them in a number of ways. Some of those are to install electric vehicle charging infrastructure, solar infrastructure, recycling, in like a multifamily or commercial type building to have composting and recycling built in. There are car share programs. A lot of those different concepts can be built in, even down to water conservation, water-wise landscaping, bioswales, pervious pavers, kind of going above and beyond to bring in sustainability. Let's see, we're making it through here. Thanks you guys for hanging in there with me. I know this is a lot to go through, but update the standards for development in natural and geological hazard. I cannot talk tonight. Geologic hazard areas. We did hear quite a bit about this. Your community is definitely encumbered by steep slopes, and you've got the Fountain Creek running right down the middle of the city. So really looking at regulations pertaining to geologic hazards, steep slopes, floodplain, avalanche paths. You're right at the wildland urban interface. So, just looking at all of that to try to make sure that we're protecting the resources that need to be protected and protecting homes from potential hazards. So developing an impervious requirement to protect the steep slopes is one recommendation. Adding regulations for the maximum scale of a single structure to prohibiting the accessory structure in excess of 500 square feet in hazardous areas. Providing graphics and visuals to the hillside regulations. Assessing the need to implement slope stability. Sometimes we may need to work in some additional studies in the slope encumbered properties. Codifying cluster development regulations. That could be an incentive to cluster and still be able to build on an encumbered piece of property. Engage the fire department to assess the need for additional wildfire mitigation standards. We've been doing a lot with landscaping in that regard and promoting fire-wise, not only drought-tolerant plant lists, but also fire-wise plant lists for homeowners in that wildland urban interface. And then it appears that the City of Colorado Springs drainage criteria manual is being used, is being referenced in the code. So looking at ensuring that we're not repeating standards where we could just reference standards, or making sure that we're using the right standards for that. All right, the sign regulations. Sign codes typically across the nation are under review and update currently. One really handy tool that we use is a table, as you can see on page, I believe it's, I might have an older document up. I believe it's 30, might have been 36 originally, might be like 33 now. But incorporating sign matrices like that one to really show what sign types are allowed in what zone districts, and then what the dimensional standards are. Graphics are super helpful in sign codes. So developing illustrations for all the different sign types, sign measurements, removing language pertaining to obscenity and deceptive signs, tying the regulations to the building occupant rather than the business or the amount of business frontage. Eliminating the trailblazer category to clarify an exemption for government signs. And revising the language pertaining to enforcement actions to allow any resident to bring an enforcement action. So the sign code in general, like I said, I think it could use a lot of graphics and just clarification. And last but not least, revising the non-conformity regulations. So what we heard through stakeholder input was that the current code creates quite a few non-conformities. So for an example, you may want to build a new deck on the back of your house, and because of the non-conformities, now you need to get a new plat and a new survey, which is quite an expensive process. So we would like to, typically when we do codes, we like to look at making sure that we're not creating a ton of new non-conformities, but we'd also like to, in this code, look backwards a little bit to see how we can maybe relieve some of the pressure on the existing nonconformities. So we would like to add standards to clarify the ability or inability to expand a nonconforming portion of a nonconforming use and revise nonconforming regulations to minimize impact on property owners. So it's a big ask, but we'd really like to dive into this one and see what we can do to try to relieve reliance on variances and waivers and try to make it a little bit easier to do the right things, make the right things easy, basically, is what we say. So that is the conclusion of all the recommendations. And as I said, they are all simply that, recommendations. We'd like to get your feedback this evening on some of this, and then as we move forward and work through each of them, we draft the code in several different modules. So we'll take on a couple of these topics and start diving in and doing additional public outreach, staff outreach, work with our advisory task force or advisory committee, and that's how we get it done. So next slide. 2 slides, actually, one more. So now what we'd really like to do is, based on the 11 themes, and now that you have a little bit more background on what these recommendations are, we would like to hear from you what you think should be the priority ranking as far as which ones we should tackle first. And I will tell you, we have a standard process, which, reorganizing the code is probably the first thing we would do. And then we would start to dive into specific regulations. Graphics get developed as we go. But we wanted to hear what you felt should be the top priorities. So that link that Christine sent you to get into the Menti, now's the time to jump in there and do your ranking. You can do it from a cell phone, from your computer, from an iPad, and it'll just give you a category, and you just put your first rank and then your second rank in there. And then we'd like to have a little bit of a discussion on this topic once you get your rankings in.
Question, Jen, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
What email from Judy are you referring to that supposedly has a link to this?
It would have been from Christine, and I don't know, Christine, can we put the,
Okay.
Yes.
I don't think I have access to a chat. Could we put that link in the chat for anybody?
We do not have access to a chat. What I can do
Okay.
right now is I can resend that. The reason why we're not
Of that
posting it.
either.
Okay, I'm resending it right now. City Council's blind CC'd on it, and it's called Joint Meeting Info for Tuesday, April 27th at 6 p.m. I sent it yesterday at 1:22, and I just resent it to everyone at the midway through that email. It's called, we say we will use Menti, an online tool. And you'll go to menti.com, and there's a link in that email that has /8WJ YY5. So as Jen mentioned, as folks, as you go through and you prioritize these, you're going to see the ranking shift and the bars move around. So, and then in the lower right corner of your screen, you'll see, a little outline of a person and a number, and that's how many folks have participated so far from City Council and Planning Commission in this Menti prioritization exercise.
Christine, this is Tip Reagan.
Hey, Tip.
Hi, it's not working for me. I have it on my phone and it says Menti and it says the first and submit, but nothing comes up for me to do. So I think I'll just sit it out and then just talk about it, I guess.
I'm going to sit it out too.
It's just not working. That's the, so.
Okay.
I just don't like it.
If you hit submit, does it allow you to hit submit after the first option?
The thing is that it says first, select an option, and then it has little arrows up and down, but nothing will appear in that.
If you kind of touch in there, can you get it to, there's like a little roller bar
Yeah,
that should show up. It's not.
Nothing is coming up for that.
Okay.
Okay. That's okay. We can talk about it.
Yeah.
We've got plenty of time for discussion about the prioritization.
But unlike Counselor Julie Wolf, I like it. It's just that I can't make it work.
Sure.
I made it work by if you scroll down to whatever you want to pick and then you actually touch it, then it puts a check mark beside it.
Okay, so once we submit, are we done with it?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you submit on all 11?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yep. Then you're good. We have 7. It looks like we have 7 people that have fully submitted. And I will say I'm very happy to see simplify administration and formatting at the top of the list. So while people are going through this, I'll just say, like I said, well, we kind of have a basic underlying process for some of this that we go through. But, you know, if we come across anything that becomes super contentious, we need a lot more public outreach for to really get to a good, solid recommendation or solid update. You know, if we just want to make sure that the really important stuff gets done this year. And if for some reason something needs to kind of go to a parking lot and have a little bit more detail worked out, then we will do that. But we just wanted to see where your priorities lie so we can make sure that we get the right things in here. Let's see. We have 10 people in. It looks like we have quite a few more to go.
I'm going to take a quick break while this is happening. Right back.
Christine, should we give maybe a couple more minutes and then start some of the conversation?
Yeah, let's give it a few more minutes. Let folks really think about this. And Mayor Graham, we didn't discuss it, but at any point when you feel it's appropriate to call a 5-minute break, because folks need to take a break, just please let us know.
Sure. Well, maybe then now's a good time. I was thinking about 7:30, but if we're waiting for people to finish voting, why don't we take a break now? Got 6:52. Let's just plan on being back at 7 o'clock, okay? Thanks,
Sure,
everybody.
let's do that. Okay, we'll let folks finish voting and then we'll come back.
Christine, would
Yes,
it be possible for me to rank them and send it to email to you and you add to it?
Of course, yes.
Well, I could do that during the break then.
Okay.
Hey, Tip, are you on an iPhone?
Yeah.
It works really well.
Yeah, not my iPhone.
I'm so sorry, Tip.
And Jen, a computer is an option as well, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, Tip, if you wanted to try to pop it up on your computer.
I'll try that too.
Okay.
Council will let Mayor Graham follow through and call on counselors who may want to speak. So, okay, Jen, floor is yours.
Yeah, so I'd like to spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes just kind of hearing a couple of thoughts on this ranking, priority ranking exercise. And then, like Christine said, we'll move into the individual comment section. So anyone want to let me, enlighten us on why you ranked the way that you did?
This is David Armstrong, Planning Commission.
Okay.
My single the comment that I feel most strongly about is that I'm much more concerned with the process than the content. And you've laid it out very clearly how badly we need this, this update. So to provide that kind of clarity, to keep it as simple as possible, the processes for application and so forth. That's why I chose that as the first priority. And I think it, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Anyone
I'll
else?
just,
Yeah,
sort of
great.
echo that. I think it's reorganizing was really the primary goal of this zoning code update. And definitely, I think, the sentiment is why it was ranked highest. And some of the other things, when we get into detail, I can explain my reservations and why they weren't ranked very high. But in general, I think first couple items or the first three are pretty much what I've heard over and over.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, you look like you're about ready to say something.
Yes.
Judith Chandler, City Council. Sustainability, in my opinion, is the number one thing, because if we don't have sustainability, all the rest of this is rather moot. But I'm grateful to see it made it into the top 5. And I also appreciate number 2 and 3. I think updating definitions is critical. We keep talking about
Here in
things
City Hall, we can't hear you. Sorry.
Oh,
we missed half of Alan's and we can't hear Judith.
Oh no. Can you hear me now?
We can
We're
hear you
having a
just fine.
technical issue here and our facilitator's trying to get us back so that we can talk and hear you guys.
Okay, Jen, we'll just sit tight for a second until they
Okay.
cue us that they're able to hear us in the in City Hall.
Yes, John. Okay, I'm unmuted, and it's my understanding you couldn't hear Alan either. Okay. 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 All right, thanks. Yes.
On it, we think we'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, we think we may have resolved the technical difficulty. If you can hear me in your remote, please raise your hand. Looks like we're back. I'm sorry, I think Alan was probably about halfway through his remarks. So if we could go back to Alan, and then Judith had comments, and Judith, we're going to ask you to take it from the top after Alan finishes. Thank you. Alan, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Basically, what I was saying is that the top 4 items pretty much echo what I've heard over and over. And, I think that really was the focus of the zoning code rewrite, was to simplify and modernize and things, update definitions, do all those things, all those inconsistencies. I think we pretty much identified those, and that's why those are ranked up there.
Thank you. Councillor Chandler?
Thank you. Councillor Chandler, Judith Chandler, for those who I don't know yet. So to echo what Alan Delowich said, I'm just really thrilled to see sustainability in the top 5, because if we don't have sustainability, the rest of this is rather moot conversation, especially with climate change and the drought. I'm also very happy to see update definitions as number 3. We're talking about all these concepts tonight that we haven't defined yet, like sustainability and attainable and affordable housing. Those things, it's easy to talk about them, but when we're asked to define them, that's a whole different ballgame. And I'm thrilled to see number 2 as the developing commercial and residential design standards. So real pleased.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jen, I think you have a better idea how you want this to flow, so maybe I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I believe Mike Casey might have had a comment, but it looks like he's gone off camera. So I think, oh, Mike, there you are. Did you say you had something you wanted to add?
Sorry, I was trying to get into the group view. Anyway, I'm surprised that number 7, parking requirements, is so far down the list. I think that is a top priority, and I'm just kind of surprised it was number 7.
Okay. Does anyone else want to weigh in on the rankings, or could we get into our individual discussion?
This is Tip Reagan again.
Yeah.
What would be helpful if maybe would be to talk about what's in the realm of the feasible. Because, for example, number 1 and 3, this is not exactly how I rank things, but I'm comfortable with the way it's been ranked. They're all important in a different way. 1 and 3 seem to be the essential kind of housekeeping, getting us all on the same page, kinds of things, the definitions. I appreciate what's already been said about that. 1 and 3 seem to be very important that way. Those seem to be qualitatively different than something like developing commercial design standards or incorporating sustainability. So to me, like the 1 and 3 seem to be, I think we probably have pretty good agreement that they need to be done. But when you get to the other ones, as you say, like getting into the weeds, such as number 2 and 4 and 5, how many of those are doable? Like, it's hard for us to talk maybe in the abstract without knowing. In 6 months, could we do 2 of them or 3, or do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. We made a commitment when we proposed on this project to do all of it if we needed to. So that's why we have such a large team. We have different people that write different sections at different times, and there's certainly some of this that can be kind of done in the background while others are being brought forward. So great.
This is Mayor Graham. If I could make a quick comment, kind of in response to Mike Casey's remark. Regarding the parking requirements, I agree that it's a critical issue for Manitou. However, I ranked it fairly low in terms of priority because we've done a lot of work on it. And as we move into the summer, city staff, primarily Roy Cheney and his folks, are going to be fine tuning that and testing it throughout. So I would think that probably about September, we'd have a lot more data and a lot more experience. So in my mind, it would make sense to sort of delay doing a whole lot more since so much has already been done and we're now in the sort of the implementation and test phase.
Great. That's a great comment. Thank you. All right. I think let's move into our targeted discussion. So would our Planning Commission chair start off by, I think it's easiest if you just call names and
Sure.
go kind of one at a time.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll let's see, I'm just going to go down the list here. First person that shows up is Mike Casey. So Mike, you have 3 minutes and this is just sort of like a intro. I'm hoping we'll get more deliberation and discussion later since this is a work session, but this is sort of like your top level impressions.
Okay, just top level impressions. The conditional use process has been discussed quite often, and I hope that that can be changed in some way just to expedite the process. It seems kind of cumbersome, and especially, I don't want to go into details, but just even our last meeting, when somebody wants to open up a business prior to the summer rush, there certainly should be a way to get a person in business faster, in my opinion. On the variances, other consultants have said the exact same thing, that variances should be rare, and they do seem to come up quite a bit. So if this code rewrite can eliminate the need for variances, that would be great. The industrial and manufacturing comments, I just, there's a lot on the table. I can't imagine that being any lower. Just thinking about somebody having the need or the desire to bring manufacturing into Manitou. I know it sounds good maybe, but in reality, I just can't quite see it happening or even where. The design guidelines outside of downtown is a great idea. You know, the lack of any kind of control on the east side of town is just not there. On the telecommunications comment, I think that was a major part of the presentation. And I remember that when that went into the planning commission, I remember thinking to myself, we don't know anything about this. I don't want to learn about it. So maybe there should be a whole nother team dedicated. If telecommunications is going to be a major event in the town, then maybe a subset of experts can address that topic, because I don't think anybody on planning commission really can address that issue. That's just my opinion. Vacation rentals, I can go on for a long time about that one, but if somebody wants to talk on the side, I'm all in. Parking, again, I think is a big deal. The embrace the creek comment is stellar. I think the creek downtown has been ignored. That's a long time ago, of course, but if we can do a better job in the future, that would be huge. And then finally, the point system that was mentioned in the sustainability is a great idea.
Great, thanks. Next would be Carrie Storm.
Thank you. Well, I really have been impressed with the process. I love the ranking live tonight. I think the thing that I've heard the most about when I talk to people is the importance of the clarity and the simplification and making the process more user-friendly and less onerous. So I think all of these, what's been discussed, the different best practices from other cities, was interesting to look at and review. I read through the whole document. I thought it was really interesting. And I really look forward to the process.
Thank you. See, David Armstrong.
I think that ADUs is a topic in which Manitou surprisingly has been way behind, and it's high time that we address that, and it's very important. I think matching the guidelines, the standards to existing conditions, and most of Manitou is existing, makes a lot of sense, and it could make the planning department's job a lot easier. I think addressing the integration or evaluation balance between existing different adjacent land uses is quite important. And I don't know if this can be addressed, but I think within zones, that's important too. I'm somewhat schooled in European planning standards, Germany in particular, where you really are not allowed to block someone else's view, their sunlight, those kinds of things. Those would be my initial comments.
Thank you. Gloria?
I think the report is really comprehensive and covers a lot of things, and I'm glad to see that we'll address 1 through 11 in some form. I agree with Tip that some are going to be easier to coordinate and get done, because some are mainly bureaucratic kinds of things. I'm always glad to get the bureaucraties out of our municipal code to the greatest degree possible and simplify it so that people can actually go to it and not have to call the planning staff for an interpretation of what it really means. I like the notion of timelines with the consideration that they may vary depending upon how busy things are in our town, because sometimes I know the planning staff gets in a situation if somebody really says, how many weeks will this take? And, you know, it doubles the amount of time. And so timelines, I think, are important with the caveat that they are flexible. I love the notion of the point system. I think that's a great idea. And I think non-conforming regulations are an important area because in our town, there's a lot of that comes up where people have bought a property and then they want to make an adjustment to it or an enhancement to it and realize that something hasn't been done up to code in the past, and what do they do now? And lastly, I would say the number 2 in our rankings tonight, develop commercial and residential design standards. For me, that is going to be the most time-consuming and difficult to do. Perhaps not so much in commercial, but in residential design, because as I go around Manitou, we have all sorts of different types of buildings and residences, and you know that always comes down to kind of personal preference and trying to you know, decide what is appropriate in what neighborhoods is going to be. I think a very emotional issue for a lot of people. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Tip, I think you're next.
Thank you guys. There's been so many great comments that already been made, and I might just isolate and jump on a couple of them. But I think that even though I might agree or disagree personally with some of the specific recommendations here and there, for example, I too don't think that it makes much sense to worry about having industrial zones in Manitou when we're adjacent to Colorado Springs. So there's some things that I probably wouldn't agree with here and there, but generally speaking, I think that this has been a fantastic process, and I really appreciate the expertise of our planners in Manitou and working collaboratively with all of you who are helping us see this process through. This has already been said. I think that the sustainability point system is fantastic. I actually think of the more substantive issues, the design guidelines for the east and west parts of town I had ranked them the highest. I think that it's extremely important, especially given how people are already wanting to develop things and things are going up that might not fit into those areas as we had envisioned them when we did the URAs. The creek, it's part of that. I love that idea too, and incorporating it rather than just having, you know, like big hotels back up against it. So the thing about the variances that's come up over and over every time we've hired outside consultants, that I do think that we need to have fewer variances, but then we need to go through and find the standards and not simply make standards that are easier just on the face of it so that we don't give variances, but we need to have, sometimes we might need to tighten things up and make things more stringent. Sometimes they might be less stringent, but sometimes more. And then we have to go along with that. We need to not give the variances when we've decided what really makes sense for the communities. The last point I would anchor David Armstrong, the point about adjacent land uses. I think that's extremely important. And it's something that's extremely complex for a town, Manitou Springs, that has the kind of strange topography that it has. But I'm very excited about this process. I think it's really weird. I think that this is making a lot of sense, and I think it's just great. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I think we've hit everybody but me on the Planning Commission, so I'll just sum up my thoughts. I definitely believe that the usability, reorganizing, overhauling definitions, all those elements are extremely important, and I'm glad they're ranked pretty high. Design standards, definitely, I think we've heard over and over again, we need to address that. When it comes to variances, I'm a little more reluctant to follow the guidance that was recommended in this draft. I think, you know, there was a sentiment of we need to maybe relax some standards in order to have fewer variances, and I think that's not really the approach that we should go with. We have to maybe get better list of criteria for when variances are approved. We already have a supermajority strategy for approving variances. And I just think that, for example, one of the examples given was that, well, maybe height variances need to be, height limits need to be increased in order to allow people to have vaulted ceilings. I don't think that is necessarily beneficial to the community. I think, people need to work within the realm of what we have. We've lived with it. And I think with creativity, people can still have wonderful homes, and we just need to stick with that. I guess a couple of things that I noticed, like there was a mention that we need to look at the sexually oriented business criteria and maybe adjust that. And I would just suggest to the team that they review what was done and why it was done over the last, especially in 2018, I believe, we did some extensive work on this. We had a moratorium and we came up with what we decided was the best approach for our community. So I would hate to spend a lot of time revisiting that. Another area where we do have a start is on long-term housing in old hotels. We do have an ordinance for that, and if it needs adjustment, that's fine. But we shouldn't just throw out and what we have and spend too much time on that. And the other thing that I guess is a lot of concern to me is as we go forward, we really need to figure out a way to put a lot of emphasis on what our residents, our citizens feel and how it impacts them. What I've seen so far, I don't see a lot of vetting of who's commenting, who's voting, who's saying what we need to change, how we need to relax things or how we need to modify things. And a great example would be the short-term rentals. We did have one community engagement activity, and it was sadly not really a representative sample of our community. It was a lot of people, investors, industry people who really wanted to get a bigger stake in our community. And I think somehow as we go through this process, we need to figure out how to identify who's participating and maybe have a heavier weight for people who live in Manitou and are going to be here day to day. And that brings up my last concern, and that is, just looking tonight with our attendees, pretty much, we have a fairly substantial number of people, but they're all people who are really involved on a day-to-day basis in our community from different boards, commissions, and so on. And we really have to figure out how we can engage the public. We really need to have citizens weigh in. And sadly, a lot of citizens don't start participating until they're upset with something. So hopefully we can get that community engagement going as we go through the process. And that's all I've got right now.
Great. Thank you, Alan. So now we'll switch over and get comments from city council members. I'm going to start off alphabetically. So Steve Bremner, do you have comments?
No, I have no comments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And then let's go to the other end of the alphabet. Julie Wolf, how about you?
Okay, thank you. I think this process is fabulous. Having been on the Planning Commission for 10 years, appreciate how long overdue this is, and it looks like we've got a great team, and I'm so encouraged. I am discouraged by the timeline. I think it's way too rushed, but I think it's a great process. So real quick, and I'm going to try my best to keep under 3 minutes. You know how I am. I'll try to talk fast. So I agree with the sustainability point system. I think that's a really good idea. I just have to say, as an overview, that the report is replete with what I would call policy statements with which I strongly disagree. And so that's really disturbing to me, because if that's the premise from which we're operating, amplified by the fact that we have no idea who some of these so-called stakeholders are, it just bothers the heck out of me. It's like saying you try to talk to somebody who's a member of, what is that, Mad Mothers of Drunk Drivers, and trying to convince them that, oh, our poor police are so busy issuing so many police traffic speeding tickets. We need to raise the speed limit, and then we don't have to have so many speeding tickets. Well, that's the analogy I felt when I read there are too many variances. So let's quote, to make the right things easier, to quote, what Jen Gardner said earlier. I don't agree with that. I don't think we should respond to the fact that there are a lot of requests for variances by saying, oh, well, let's take a libertarian approach and eliminate the rules. You can make your buildings as tall as you want, and then nobody needs a variance. But I don't think that's best for our city. So I found that troublesome. And I also have to say how unfortunate it is that we have such little time here, because I think at some point in life, before this is finalized, it's important for us to exchange ideas and have a discussion and a conversation. And I object to the proposal that, oh, well, just meeting one-on-one with one of our teams will do it. No, I want to hear other people's ideas and why they're good ideas or why they're not good ideas, and be able to ask questions and formulate the best result. And we can't do that when we're sitting here and we get 3 minutes each. So I do object to this process, and I hope it's not the end, because as Alan said, it's not enough. I think another reason that we need to really weigh in favor of the rights of residents to enjoy living in their homes versus the right of the city to, try and collect more and more taxes from more and more businesses, and to appease the interests of the business owners to make more money for themselves. That is a theme I read throughout the packet, throughout the policy packet. And so that bothered me. I don't agree with that. For example, in the parking, when you say, as businesses within the city continue to grow and redevelop, and this is a quote from the packet, the city should seek appropriate parking solutions for expansions of existing businesses and new development. And so I totally disagree with that premise. I think the entire lesson of the mobility study and everything that we've been working toward is to reduce the number of vehicles coming into our city and to encourage alternative forms of transportation, buses, shuttles, e-bikes, all that. But this push to use our precious parkland to park more and more cars and to find more and more parking spots outside of downtown like other cities have done, so we can park more cars, I think that's contrary to the spirit and vision of what our residents want. And so I don't know where our consultants got these policy positions, if they got it from Christine or if just their own point of view. So in terms of the vacation rentals, Christine's report reflects that most stakeholders who reported not wanting any increase in the number of vacation rentals in the recent community engagement. And that apparently bothered her, because she quoted and noted that in 2019, when there were a lot of very local landlords raising a fuss in town about wanting the code rewritten to allow more and more vacation rentals, not in Crystal Hills, of course, but everywhere else. And especially in certain neighborhoods outside of Crystal Hills. And Christine was disappointed that not enough of these landlords participated in our recent community surveys and our interviews. And so she mentions in the packet in the report that she wants to re-engage them with the incentive of trying to change the code per their views as expressed in 2019. Why are we, whose side are you on?
Julie,
I don't agree.
Julie,
Oh, was my 3 minutes up?
Yeah, you're actually pushing 5 now.
Oh,
so
thank you.
If you got, okay, all right, thanks, Julie. A lot to be said there, right? Okay, Councilor Chandler, please.
Thank you. So this is going to come as no surprise to everyone that while I'm very impressed with the process thus far, I'm also concerned about the process thus far. And I will echo what Councillor Wolf said, and I've said this in a council meeting before. This group has had 5 months to work on this project. And I, as a councilwoman, have had 4 days to digest a very large volume of information and an hour and 32 minutes to talk to you about it. And I'm going to object to being kept to 5 minutes. I think that's disingenuous. And it certainly makes it very hard to represent the residents of Manitou. There's a lot to unpack here. And if we need to slow down this process, it doesn't have to be a speeding train. I like the process. I like it thus far, but I just find it, you know, when I take 4 days out of my life to read every word of this, and I don't see my family and I don't see my grandkids, I want more than 5 minutes to comment on what's here. So the first thing that I want to comment on is sustainability. Appreciate that it's came in as number 4 tonight. We have a climate action and tree planting work group, and our group is responsible for Manitou becoming Tree City USA. And I would like to both ask the question and make an offer. Why weren't we consulted at all in this process with the other boards and commissions? I realize we're just a work group at this point, but we have 2 master gardeners and a consultant from a sustainability consultant with a master's degree at PPCC and a councilwoman and several other people. So we have a lot to offer there. So with regards to sustainability, I looked at the Jackson Hole environmental analysis. I like the point system. I think that's a good place to start. I would like to advocate that Manitou Springs in their code initiate a tree permit, that you must have a permit if you're going to take a tree out that's greater than 6 inches in caliper, and have a landscape improvement permit to which the climate action work group will work with the individual or commercial entity to, there are algorithms on how much canopy a tree needs to replace. So I would like to see sustainability as a separate chapter that includes trees, landscaping, lighting, got lots of light pollution, wildlife and pollinator habitat, amongst other things. I love the idea about the Fountain Creek and the URA being a focal point. One of the problems we're having on the Fields Park side of the URA is these big hotels are creating light pollution with the lights being on in the hotels. So that I appreciated that. With regards to variances, there are a lot of us residents who feel that variances have been handed out like candy to developers for whatever reason.
Now, Judith, you're at 3 minutes. So if you could please sum up, please.
So there's some vitriol. Mayor, I don't mind taking my turn, but I did a lot of homework tonight. So I would like to be able to address the issues that I want to address.
I understand. I think we all did a lot of homework. We have all pretty much tried the planning commission people set a pretty good example. They stuck to 3 minutes. So, you know, if you can sum things up in just a minute or so, please finish.
So thank you. So there's some vitriol around enforcement, and residents are feeling that they're held to a different standard with regards to the code enforcement. With regards to attainable and affordable housing, I'd like to see the definitions of those. I think that we need to be very careful. Sustainability to me means living within our natural resource means. And I will say one more thing about the development, commercial and residential design standards, and this is on page 19. You made a recommendation in the summary: develop design guidelines for the downtown area outside of the historic district, develop design guidelines for the urban renewal area, and develop standards to incentivize retail commercial uses. I am pretty insistent that we add develop a design guidelines for Becker's Lane corridor, because we are feeling a tremendous amount of urban blight over here. 20 heritage trees taken out, in a 1 block area now, and that's not even including 6 El Paso. And we've got some really big problems with some of the development over here. So I would definitely like to see that included. And I, again, just like to say, if we need to slow this process down, just so that, you know, we are representing the residents of Manitou, I think that's needs to be on the table. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Shada, please.
Mayor Graham, I'm going to try not to repeat all the other great comments that have come before. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, good. One of my major issues that I'd like to speak to, because I think we skirted a little bit, which is what I call adjacent zone harmony. Okay. We are a jigsaw puzzle of a community. Okay. And so I think we need to be figuring out ways. We talked a little bit about, you know, maybe certain kinds of hotels kind of spilling light over into the residential zone or the creek path and things like that. So but I think that also includes things like traffic, okay, parking, noise, height, those kinds of things. And to me, I guess I'd like to see how we somehow, you know, highlight that or integrate that in there. And then the final thing that I'd like to just kind of bring up, and maybe the consultants can answer this, I think in the end result, I would like to see toward the end of the process, us do some kind of use case testing where we take some particular prickly problems, okay, that we've tried to address in our community. Maybe they didn't come out the way we thought they would. And maybe there's a great deal of possible, you know, animosity and dissatisfaction with kind of the end result. And maybe take those examples and put them through the new process again and see whether, you know, do they come out the wash, so to speak, any better? Okay. And find out who those stakeholders are. I'm thinking of particular things. And I guess I kind of want to echo Councilor Chandler and Wolf's comments about that maybe there was kind of a sense that if we just don't have as big of standards, okay, and we just won't have as many variances, and then it'll just come out better because the city staff won't have as much work. Developers can kind of proceed on an expedited fashion. And I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with whether we've got kind of the right kind of sense of what should be going on with that. Okay, I think there was a real sense of tone somehow in this rather large document to try and digest in 4 days in talking about that. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Shada. Mayor Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. First of all, planning and zoning is definitely not my forte, so not directly related to this ordinance. I would say that some educating new councilor members might be good for people like me. And one of the things that I've noticed in my time on council is that it's very critical to have what I call reproducible decisions, thereby if 2 people get the same data, they should come up with basically the same decision. And I think that the process is moving us in that direction. It also makes it a lot easier to enforce rather than leaving things open to interpretation. I was very glad to see the design standards in here. It broke my heart when the Holiday Inn Express was came to the council that I was on, and it was approved just because the code allowed it to be approved, and it just doesn't seem to fit in with the community. I was excited to see home businesses in there. I don't know about zoning, but from an economic standpoint and Manitou Made and all of those things, I think that home businesses need more attention in general. I would like, well, you addressed it, but anything having to do with public transit, how we increase and make it easier to have more and better public transit and bicycle and pedestrian facilities, I think is critical. I've got to absolutely echo Alan's comments about the sexually oriented businesses. There was moratorium after moratorium. We put in very commonly used exclusions. And we were well aware of the risks we took when we implemented that ordinance on sexually oriented businesses. I think we have to be very careful at looking at increasing density in terms of things like parking, which people pretty much know my concerns about parking, and water use. And communication plan with the community. Someone mentioned, you know, it's almost impossible to get people interested in something until it directly affects them. And I've already heard people panicking over this new zoning code. So I think we need to just really continue to pay strict attention to getting as many people involved as possible. I love David Armstrong. I think it was David Armstrong about the view shed. In general, I think that is absolutely within the values of our community, along with the landscaping and the green infrastructure, absolutely essential. Sustainability, yep, great. URA turning around to the creek, great. I wish that had been done years ago with downtown as well. And if there's any way we can enable that even downtown, that would be great. I liked the fact that it looks like you're taking away or reducing what I call layered fees, when people were just had to, so many requirements put on them and fee after fee after fee. And it didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And lastly, I would say I'm very relieved to hear that you will rewrite the entire code, not just those in the top priority. Because I think it's all important, and I think you've come up with great things. And I do appreciate all the opportunities that I personally have had or that I've taken to participate in this process. This is actually my 4th time meeting with the consultants, and each time I've learned quite a lot and been able to provide my input. So I do appreciate that. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, that just leaves me. So I think a lot of good remarks have been made here, and I'm going to try not to repeat things too much. I do in particular like the references made to the quality of life. I think that should be an overarching principle through all of this. I think the idea of perhaps having teams to focus on specific things is worth some thought. I believe it was Mike Casey that had suggested that. I liked also John Shada's comment about trying to use some of the new policies or procedures and sort of testing as we go, so we can see if we're getting closer to a good solution. I also think some of the things that we have done in the past we can benefit from, as both Alan and Nancy had suggested, are sexually oriented businesses. We've got some history there. I don't know that we necessarily need to rebuild the wheel. I noticed in the document there was reference to fire mitigation, and actually I believe the Manatee Springs Fire Department did a pretty good paper, and actually I think they have it on their website. Bobby White did a thing on how to mitigate fire in your neighborhood, in your home. I guess something also kind of a pet topic of mine or a concern is ADUs, accessory dwelling units. And when people talk about that, I guess the theme is generally that grandma's coming to live with you and people are going to age in place. But I ask really, let's think about reality. Remember that we have an aging infrastructure with aging sewer lines and water lines. If we put more stress on that system, I think we're going to we're pushing the envelope. We're already behind where we should be, and we're trying to play catch up. So I would be very reluctant to introduce something that's going to put additional stress and load on the infrastructure. In the older parts of Manitou, there are many places where cottages were built behind homes so people could make money from the summer season. And we see how that's manifested itself now with parking problems and congestion. So I would ask us all to kind of be mindful of a sense of reality, budget and infrastructure as we go with that. That's all for me. And Christine, I guess it's back to you.
Thanks. That was great. Thanks for letting us ensure everybody had an opportunity to talk about what their concerns and primary objectives are and how we move through this. We're going to be, I think, sort of facilitating this now, getting more into that group discussion like some of you were hoping for. I think as we do that, I'm going to kind of hand this back over to Jen a little bit. And there's some great indications. Everyone did a super job of reading the report. Everyone is all of you are very engaged in this. And that's so important because you represent those constituents who aren't going to participate. While we've seen almost hundreds of people now participate in this, that not everyone's going to come out, right? So Alan Delwich, you made a great point about that. Not everyone's going to come out. Jen, could you share with us a little bit about the sections in the report? You know, there was some discussion amongst our panelists from City Council and Planning Commission, curious about where some of the statements came from, or policy statements or directives, and where we were going. Could you share with us a little bit about how that process came together and where that's originating from?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Christine. Yeah, so a lot of that came from our stakeholder community outreach. So just members of the community that, and what we do is we take, you know, if we hear tree preservation is an issue and we hear it from 30 out of the 38, we know that's a pretty key topic that we need to look into. ADUs, you know, so we take all the comments that we hear from all of our community outreach and we place it into a spreadsheet or a matrix, and we start to look through it and see where the common threads are. So that's where a lot of that direction comes from initially. And then it's up to this group this evening to say, do we agree with all of that? Do we not? Are there some of these statements that I can't remember? I think it might have been Councilmember Wolf that said, you know, just because everyone says that we need something, that doesn't mean we need it. So, and we realize that there's definitely more analysis that goes into that beyond just what the community wants. But I think it was a couple of council members anyway mentioned that, you know, this definitely needs to have community feedback and weigh in, and that's where that started from. So that's where those key kind of the key topics and elements initially came from. And this is far from the end of hearing from the community. I mean, even as we start to develop some of these regulations and we oftentimes, if we get down to something where, you know, let's look at design standards for an example, that is going to take a bit of doing, and we'll probably dive into that here very soon to set that up for success. But we put out graphics and ideas and options. And so we say, you know, would option A work better, or B or C? And we get community input on that. And we love to have Planning Commission and City Council weigh in on all of these outreach opportunities. So does that kind of answer the question, Christine, about where some of that comes from? And is very community driven to this point, and the comprehensive plan, policy documents. I mean, we've combed through everything that we're aware of. And I really appreciate Councilmember Chandler bringing up the climate action and tree planting work group. I wasn't aware of that. And we just became aware of another group recently. So we're trying to reach out to these groups in addition to make sure that we're hearing from everybody that we can. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to entertain a question to you directly.
Sure.
Regarding the questionnaire, I did notice that one of the questions was, what is your primary residence? And I noticed that 14% indicated they lived outside of Manitou, including 10% that live in Colorado Springs. Now, I don't know if these are business owners weighing in, a couple people from UPass. My concern about including people that don't live here or own a business here, their input weighing extremely heavily. Like, for example, ADUs. I don't know if, you know, 14% of people that don't live here go, ADUs, this is a great idea. So moving forward for the next questionnaire, are we going to focus more on strictly the residents and business owners of Manitou?
Yeah, and you know, we on the back end of that survey, we can see who responded to what. So we get individual responses. So we can even pull out the ones that were outside of Manitou residents and just kind of see if that weights it differently.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and we can add an additional question. I can't remember if we had it on this one. We often ask, you know, are you a resident? But we also ask if you're a business owner. So we can pair those up too. So even if you're a non-resident business owner, I feel they probably have a stake in the process as well. So
That-
yeah, we can analyze that whole back end and kind of see how that's really playing out with the results.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Any
thank
other
you.
questions? Because I do want to hit on the variance topic, if I may.
Yeah, Jen, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, I really appreciate all of your feedback and comments tonight. And I think probably the biggest takeaway that I have from this is that the variance section needs a little more clarity. I would say it's not a matter of loosening up standards completely. It just needs a hard look. So I can't remember who said it, but somebody said it elegantly that sometimes you need to tighten up standards and sometimes you need to loosen standards. It's a matter of looking at it across the board and where variances are being given out. And, and again, you all have to support that effort as well to say, if we're going to put these standards in place and there's a reason for them, then we don't want to waver from them, correct? So I think it's a giant team effort to get that one in place. That was really the main one that I wanted to hit on. So we really appreciate the comments. We've made notes of items that we need to add to and items that we feel need to be clarified based on this conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. And
Yeah.
I believe at this portion of the meeting, I think you were kind of asking the question, given this discussion, would you change your prioritization? Did I interpret that correctly? So that's kind of where I
Yes.
think you would like to have a discussion there. So if would you change your mind based on what you've heard just here recently? So with that in mind, I would look for anyone, if you'd like to speak, if you could raise your hand. I'm kind of scrolling through the video. Anybody have any comments? Jen, did you have some specific things that you wanted to bring up? You may have a method for doing this.
No, I would say if anyone else, we do have a little bit more time if you all are okay with that. I wouldn't mind opening the floor for a little bit more discussion for those of you that felt shortchanged on your time. If that's okay with everybody, maybe Mayor, you want to weigh in on that, but.
Yeah, I see some nods here. So I think we could do that. I think this overall part of the exercise, we wanted to keep to about half an hour. I think we've got about 20 minutes that we could give to this. And before we go any further, I would like to mention that City Council we're planning to visit this topic at least every other month. Okay, so we've got that scheduled for upcoming work sessions, and hopefully that'll give council a little more opportunity to work on this. And if there's a desire, we can increase that amount of time. So with that said, does anyone have a comment?
John, this is a question, I think it's a rhetorical question, but for anyone who felt like they didn't have enough time, Jen, are you and your team willing to accept written, phone comments, whatever, as further input here?
Yes, all of the above. We welcome any additional input.
Okay, and Jen, would it be
I have
better?
a comment. I don't know if you can see me, so I thought I would just jump in.
Okay, just hang on one second there, Julie.
Oh, okay.
So comments to Jen. Jen, do you want us to send them to you directly or through the planning office?
Christine, do you have a preference on that?
I don't. Right now, we've got it set up primarily in community where folks are sending lots of information into the planning department, and then we're packaging it and just sending it on so that we've got duplication where there's the information's retained in the office and then you guys also have it. So that would be probably easiest, is just to send it to, you can send it to planning@Manitou Springs, or you could email it to me. If you had a reason why you wanted to communicate directly with them, and that's absolutely fine too, because sometimes it's easier to talk to the consultants than staff.
Okay, I guess we've got several choices then. Great, thank you
Yeah,
very
for
much.
sure. Should we unshare our screen so we could
yeah,
engage?
Yeah, Counselor Wolf, you had comments, please?
Oh, yeah. My comment is if we could have a different format for the next meeting so that we can actually engage in back and forth dialogue instead of making our own little speeches. That would help me because I don't want to just make a speech. I already know how I feel, but I want to understand better why other people, particularly those that don't agree with me, I want to have a better sense of what their perspective is so I get it. So that's all. It's just the format of the meeting, and I recognize it's challenging to try and orchestrate so many people communicating. But I think real communication would be helpful instead of just these little 5 or 10 or 3-minute speeches, more of like discussion back and forth. And sometimes you allow us to do that, John, during our work sessions. I realize it wasn't really feasible tonight, but that would be my suggestion. That would really be helpful so that we can learn from each other and hopefully come to consensus, at least on some of these difficult topics, especially the comment that Nancy made kind of perplexed me about the sexually oriented businesses, because I agree we've spent a ton of legal money paying Jeff and so many hours on this thing. But our law says, no, just say no to sexually oriented businesses. They can go to Colorado Springs. And there's not one case in the country that says, oh, that's legal, that's okay. And the attorney who advised us that night when we passed that, when the ordinance got passed, said, yeah, it'd probably cost $500,000 in legal fees. And there's a good chance you'd lose because there's absolutely no support for a city just saying, forget it, we don't want it. So I don't agree that we adopted what other cities already adopted. I never heard that any other city adopted that. It's a very bold move. I'm not suggesting I want to necessarily go back to that topic, but a little bit of back and forth conversation on these things might help us better understand each other and make some progress.
Okay, great. Thanks for your comments, Julie. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Mr. Bremner, I saw you had your hand up, and then Counselor Chandler.
Yeah, I just like to know if you, Julie, or you, Judith, attended one of the feedback sessions that the Planning Commission had, because there was plenty of opportunity at that time to talk to different people. When I had my session, there were about 6 different people. So, there's opportunity to talk, if you engage, if you would have engaged with the Planning Commission. I think in this format with, I see Hollywood squares of like 20 different people up, it's pretty difficult, to talk on Zoom and have a dialogue, as you say. So I don't know. I just think it's difficult in this circumstance. And I would encourage people to engage in smaller groups, maybe. I mean, when you say reaching consensus, I don't see how we're going to reach any consensus with Hollywood squares of 20 different people up here. So that's all I got to say.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Judith, please.
Yes, just to respond to Counselor Bremner, I did do the survey and I did try to do a one-on-one. However, I had an equipment failure on my end, so I wasn't able to do that. However, I would like to say that I didn't have a 99-page report that I spent 4 days looking at in order to have questions. So I needed to digest this report in order to even know what is really going on and what direction we're going in. So I always think anytime we can discuss is fine, but I need the information in front of me before I can do that. I don't want to miss this opportunity to support something that Mayor Graham said, and I think it's very, very important what you said about ADUs. And I do support the fact that part of sustainability is looking at our resources, water, sewer, infrastructure, and at a time when we are in a climate change induced drought, and we'll probably have to impose water restrictions for one, and our infrastructure issues. I think that we have to be very careful about increasing the density of our population in Manitou. I do not believe that accessory dwelling units will increase affordable / attainable housing. I think that's an interesting marketing strategy, but if most people who would have an ADU, might want to consider, renting that or leasing it out at at market value. So, but I think that that was a really important point, and I support your comments, Mayor. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Chandler. Tip, you have a comment, please, sir?
I appreciate this. I think this has been a good meeting. You know, my profession this last year has been teaching Zoom classes. I sometimes have many more people on than this. And a lot of what needs to, I appreciate this sort of Hollywood Squares, the problematic there. One of the things is that it depends, the different kinds of discussions are suited for different kinds of outcomes. And so my view about the process so far and tonight is that we read this huge 100-page report and that we got a lot of issues out there and we heard general things. So for example, when Councilwoman Chandler made her comment earlier on about sustainability, I was like, yeah, that's really interesting. And that's persuasive to me. But so that's true. The thing that's hard is that when we're looking at 11 different topics and we're trying to go in depth about them, this format won't do that. But I don't think that's what this format was supposed to do. I think it was supposed to get a lot of these things out on the table for us to think more generally about it, to think about how the process is going to be unfolding. And so I think that this makes a lot of sense that we had this and general first impressions and making 3-minute or 5-minute speeches about it. I think that those gets the philosophical issues. I really appreciate what Alan and Julie said and others of you more on the philosophical level. I think that's great. So my advice in going forward would be to change the kind of dynamic of the discussions and have more of these meetings, perhaps joint work sessions, but only look at 2 of the things at a time. So if you look at 2 at a time, then we can really focus on it. We can have a sustained discussion, like when if Councilwoman Chandler mentioned some aspect about sustainability, then we can really talk about it in a focused way before jumping on to another topic or something. And so that would be my suggestion. So I applaud our efforts and what happened tonight. I think it makes sense where we are. And then I think that we change things and package things in a different way to start going more in depth in sustained discussions and engagement, the way Julie Wolf has been saying, where we might change our minds and get everything on the table and all that kind of stuff. That's what I would be suggesting.
Oh, I love that
Great.
idea, Tip. I think that would be helpful. That's a good perspective.
I agree. That's an awesome idea.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tip. And I see Mike Casey has his hand up. So Mike, you have the floor.
Thank you. I thought it was educational that the consultants were not aware of a committee. I think it was related to the trees, maybe. So I would just encourage council to think about other things that are going on in the city that these consultants might find useful. And Mr. Mayor, you mentioned that there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes related to parking. I hope that they have access to that information as well.
I would think so. Certainly, Mr. Cheney is a wealth of knowledge, and he understands the history of it, the vision of it, and the day-to-day headaches. So I'm sure if they dipped into his world, they'd get a pretty good update.
Okay, thanks.
I've seen some heads nodding against the remarks, so that's encouraging. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I just wanted to express my admiration actually for the report, in that as I was reading through all the comments, I got whiplash, because it seemed like one comment was in one direction and then the next comment would be the complete opposite. So to be able to draw the themes out of all of that in a objective fashion that then we could come in and apply our intimate knowledge of our own community to, I think was a very helpful first step. So, kudos to draw it, because that's what we struggle with all the time, as the mayor often says in Manitou, it seems like if 50% are for it, 50% are going to be against it. And that's, we continue to see a lot of that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Delwich, please.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say, I was about to suggest what Tip suggested, of taking 1 or 2 topics at a time. And I think that could be a really powerful way to have more people attend who have a stake in the game. Like if if we made it pretty clear that on such and such work session, we were going to have a 30-minute discussion of ADUs, we'd have a lot of people show up. Or if we had a 30-minute discussion on short-term rentals, we could get a lot more participation, at least people in the community paying attention. Tonight was pretty abstract and pretty technical, but if we do this one by one or two a night, we'll really get probably a lot more interest.
Okay, thank you, Alan. And I saw a lot of heads nodding there in our Hollywood Squares boxes, so it seems like there's support for that. Do we have any other comments at this point? In that case, Jen, I think you have an idea of where you'd like to see this go from here, so I guess we'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you guys for those comments at the end about how to break things up with the technical advisory committee. That's exactly how we work. We'll divide it up into specific topics. You'll see questionnaires come out in those specific topics. And at that point, that would be a great time to circle back with you all in joint work sessions so that we can target our conversations from here forward. So I think that will, if it sounds like that's the will of this group, and I think that would be a fabulous way to move forward. So our next steps are going to be to dive in with those first few topics. So the reorganization, the simplification, just starting to wade through all the language and start to piece the puzzle together. I've likened this project to a quilt in the past. Christine and I have talked about that quite a bit. We've got a bunch of patches now, a bunch of different pieces, and it's about stitching them together, and then it'll be about stitching in that detail. So we will, you should see, well, first of all, I'd like to get your comments so we can finalize the report, get any tweaks to the report to finalize that, and we'll get that, pushed back out. But then we will start in on what we call module 1, which will be the reorganization and starting to look at some of the top priorities. So.
Okay,
I really appreciate all of the feedback tonight. This is very, very helpful to us. And I know it was high level and we'll get into more detail, but it's very helpful to hear where we're at and where we need to head.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jen. And just, I guess, thinking that 20 talking heads on Hollywood Squares is maybe not enough. I was curious to know who's on the Technical Advisory Committee, I believe you call it. Christine, maybe that's a question for you. If you could give us a little background on who's part of that.
Sure. I had a medical emergency, so I had to leave the office early today, which has my list. But what we did is I reached out to all the boards and commissions, any committees that are in town that seem to be organized or have reached out to us, to let them know that, they can have 1, 2, 3, 4, as many reps as would be interested in participating. And almost everyone has responded. And so we have members from all official boards and commissions and committees that I'm aware of. And then from there, when we were going through the stakeholder engagement process, we asked folks, how interested are you? And so we've had, even as recently as a couple of days ago, following the HAB board meeting, there was another member of that group who said, I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of the ongoing. I don't want to wait until you come back to my particular board to hear an update or to have the discussion there. I want to be a part of it. And so I will circle back around when I can come back into the office and share that list. It's growing by the day. I think one of the important things to know is that it's not an apply for and you're selected process. There are anybody who wants to participate can participate in it. And we can give folks as high level of an engagement or as into the details as they want on it. But yeah, I apologize. I intended to have that with me tonight, but I had a family medical emergency to leave the office for this afternoon. So I didn't get to bring it with me.
Okay, we understand. Thank you. Councillor Chandler, yeah.
Well, I wanted to confirm, I wasn't sure who we are sent, if we're emailing comments, are we emailing them to Planner Lowenberg? Christine, are you wanting our questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely, please, yeah. And as often, right now, I think it's important to know too, this project was a part of our entire department's work plan. And so every single planning department employee, including myself, is spending hours on this every week. And so any format, any means by which you want to engage, we're available. And the same thing goes with Jen and her team. They've been really amenable to some last minute engagement and last minute calls and last minute, small groups. So yeah, definitely just send it our way, and we'll make sure everybody who's a part of it gets to see the comments and helps respond and make sure it's incorporated.
Great, thank you. Jen, at this point, are you looking for, I think at one point, your question was, would we change our mind on what we voted on earlier today? So do you want to speak to that? Or we could poll the audience here.
Yeah, it seemed like when you asked that question before, nobody had any response. So I'd like to just maybe a quick head nod is do we have it right, or do we need to reassess our priorities?
Would anyone like to have that histogram bar put up again to see how we voted? We don't. Okay, I think we've
Good.
seen enough. It seems like okay. Does anybody have any strong comments or feelings contrary to what the histogram showed? Any heartburn? Mayor Pro Tem, please.
Sure. The only thing I would say is, and I'm echoing Tip here, that the definitions and the simplifications seem to be underlying of everything. So to me, and I think he used the words, they're different, qualitatively, they're different. So I would think that perhaps they should be number 1 and 2, but I'm not, it's not really important to revote it. I just think that that's a distinction.
Great.
I would support that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Judith. Christine, please.
Sure. To reiterate, I think that Jen, we should make sure we let everyone know that we're not just going to work on a couple things at a time, right? I mean, we've got, because the team is pretty big, Mark's on the call tonight too. The legal team, man, they are just diving in, right? They are working on their angle and what they have to do. They're not just waiting while we talk about one particular area, right? They know what they need to do. They're getting started on that, so that we can be moving pretty diligently on many fronts at the same time.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Okay, so I guess what I'd hope is that, and it seems like the consensus in general that we like the process, that we like the direction for the most part we're going, and we've sort of set priorities that we're reasonably content with. To me, that seems like that's a reasonable endorsement and direction to the group to go ahead and push forward. So I would hope, Christine and Jen, that that this all makes sense to you. If not, now would be a good time to say it. And likewise for any members of the Planning Commission or City Council, if we've got some strong feelings, we should probably state them briefly now and move forward. Any comments? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, Jen, what do we need to do now? Do you think Jen and Christine, do you have enough to work with for the next go round?
Absolutely. I think maybe we set a deadline for comments. Is maybe a week for everybody. What day is this? This is Tuesday.
It's Tuesday. Yeah.
Give you the rest of the week and through the weekend if you want to make any other written comments or reach out to us for any other one-on-one conversations or to talk through anything. Maybe try to wrap that up in the next week. I'll tell you, I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. I love writing code, so I'm kind of ready to just dive in and start reorganizing. So we'll probably start some of that here, as early as next week anyway.
Okay, I would propose then we give it a week. So
Okay.
if we said close the business May the 4th, that's a week from tonight. So, and the council will be busy with other things as well too, but it's a week, so we got that. Okay. Are there any objections out there? Okay, it looks like we're okay with that. So All right, I think we can go ahead and call this good for tonight, and I'm sure we'll be visiting this topic again. And certainly I appreciate the comments a lot of you made regarding the format of the meeting and suggestions to maybe focus on a couple of topics at a time and push on with that. Great, thank you. I think we can go ahead and go on with our next item is receive or act on council correspondence. Before we go into that, I would give the planning commission members an opportunity if you want to sign off. If you've had enough, that's fine. We certainly do appreciate your participation. So
Absolutely.
Dave,
Thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay. So, okay, I'm sorry. Judy is going to move the planning commission members into the attendees list, so they can still listen, but we can go ahead and conclude business or continue. All right. Receive or act on council correspondence. Anybody have anything? I think Councilor Wolf had her hand up first, and then Councilor Chandler. Councilor Wolf, please.
I was asked a question, I don't know the answer, and it had to do with the notice that was sent out about the Manitou drinking water. And the question was, the statement that we got said something about we were in trouble because our water system is not being operated by a state certified operator at the appropriate level, whatever at the appropriate level means. So I was asked, does that mean we didn't have a state certified operator? Or we had nobody, or the operator lost his license, or the operator was only working 1 hour a year? What does that mean at the appropriate level? Like, what really happened? Why didn't they tell us? I said, I don't know, but I'll bring it up tonight. So do you know, Mayor?
I think Denise can speak to that, Julie. So let's let Denise have the floor.
Okay.
Yeah, what happened is the state certification for the plant operator changed by the state level, and we couldn't get last year due to COVID-19, they did not do any testing. So we are not the only city in this situation. We're still operating in the same way, and we still have the same person, but it goes to a Class A license. So as of today, we've signed an agreement with another organization, and they'll be our operating system, for which is the Class A, and that happens on a regular basis. And then until we get our operator to that Class A license, and he has to test for that. But during COVID-19, they didn't test. So our water is safe. It's been doing the same. We've been operating it the same way. It's just that the state changed their operating license certification.
Okay, thank you, Denise. Julie, does that help? Julie, is that helpful?
Not really. I guess that's not really clear to me. We had someone, but then the state changed their regulations, so you had to be certified. And so since it was COVID for a year, we didn't hire anyone that was so certified, and we didn't do any testing.
No, that's
no
the case. No, Julie. So we have somebody who has a Class B certification. The state changed it to a Class A certification, and due to COVID, they didn't allow any testing to take place to become a Class A certified. So we now have to have a Class A. We have that taken care of, so we're in compliance, and then our operator will test. If you look right now, there's probably 30 Class A certification operating positions open in the state. So we are not the only position, the only city that has this, and it's very difficult to find Class A certified operators.
Thank you. Thank you. I got confused because when you said there was no testing done because of COVID, I thought you meant there was no testing of the water. So I couldn't understand how you knew the water was safe if you didn't test it, but now I get it. So thank you. Thank you.
The same procedure for the water operation, and to ensure it is safe continues, and we do that day by day, and we do all the right testing for that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
When I saw the notice, I was a little bit concerned, so I added bourbon to my water, and it seemed to be okay. Let's see, who else has something?
You what? You put a bird in your water?
No, I added bourbon to my water.
Oh, John. Okay.
But and it seemed to be okay, so you can try it too,
Oh, thank you. That's a good suggestion.
anytime.
Okay.
Well,
I
I'm
move
sorry,
that we, oh, no, it's not over yet.
not yet, but it will be soon, I
Oh,
think.
sorry. Oh, it's Judith's turn.
Oh, Judith,
Oh,
do you have something?
I don't know how to follow up on that one, but I will tell you that OSAC met last evening, and in addition to a very full agenda, we're sad to have Michael Mayo, our chairman, step down after 7 years of dedicated service. He will be missed. The good news is that Vice Chairwoman Nancy Wilson was elected chairwoman. Shannon Solomon will be the vice chair, and Andrea Sotelo will continue as secretary. So we have a very capable and passionate group of leaders on OSAC. Just wanted to let you know. But again, just to thank Michael Mayo for his years of service. The only other thing I have is this Friday is Arbor Day. And to celebrate that, on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, the tree planting group and climate action group will be planting 2 trees in memoriam to the Canyon Avenue trees that were cut down several years ago, the heritage trees. So if you can come out at 9 o'clock on Saturday and watch those trees get planted, we'd appreciate it. And then in the URA, they are putting a fairly large spruce in. So I'm happy to report that as well. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Anybody else? Mayor Pro Tem, please.
Yeah, the match board met last week, and they are reopening for the second round of applications for the small grants. It'll open on the 1st of May and close on the 30th of May. And they have approximately $22,000 to distribute for the rest of this year. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anything else from council members? Okay, apparently not. So let's go on to the city administrator's report. Mr. Cheney?
Yes, good evening, and just want to report that the streets department is filling a lot of potholes and fixing a lot of signs from the winter damage. So you'll see that happening in the next couple of weeks here. That's all I have tonight.
Thank you. And Denise?
Yeah, I'm going to turn it back to Roy just for a moment. We met yesterday with Becky Seibert, I always say it incorrectly, regarding a CDOT grant. And she's going to be filling this out for us, but it's regarding some art on the streets. It's a really great opportunity for our community, and it's very Manitou-like, but it's also with safety and traffic calming. So I'll go ahead and turn that over to Roy, and then we'll be sending out council an update of what this looks like and bringing back to you in a work session so you can see it. But with that, let me turn it over to Roy. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so we were approached by Becca Seibert on safety. CDOT has a program, and we're looking at El Paso and around Memorial for pedestrian and mobility anyway with the TMMP. So there's some money available. We were just told about it, so it's short turnaround. The lower amount is due by Friday for sending that information in, and that's for the street art. And basically, a lot of communities now are adding street art, and they're putting this art on the corners around the street areas that have problems. And it's reduced traffic speeds by 45% and it's protecting pedestrians. It's working really well in communities. So we're looking at by the spa building and by Hiawatha, where we have a lot of foot traffic, a lot of close calls and some injuries in that area, to do kind of a test run out there and get some funds to do that. And also we're looking at a longer process to get some funding. And that'll be about 3 to 4 weeks out to get some money for El Paso, for mobility, for bike pullouts and other things there to make it a safer bike route. So it's just a quick turnaround, just letting you know, we will bring information to City Council and show them what we're doing. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. And Denise, I think you have a comment?
Yeah, so a couple of other things I wanted to add, but I do want to do a shout out to Becca at the Creative District. I think she's on as participants tonight, and she's just been a huge support and a partner with us in the city. I also want to mention that this last weekend on Saturday was the Great American Cleanup Day, and Public Works led that along with 40 volunteers. I've heard between 40 and 50, 3 staff members, and they collected over 50 bags of trash. So for everybody that showed up to help keep Manitou clean, thank you for that. And thanks for the leadership of Public Works. So that was great. Also talked a little bit about the water notice. And with that, also, we dropped the survey card today. We're asking all residents to complete a survey, and it's a survey about customer service. So it's very specific, only a couple of questions. You should be receiving those in by hopefully by Thursday or Friday of this week, or if not, the beginning of next week. We're going to be promoting that. I would ask you to promote everybody in your neighborhood to please complete that, as it gives us our baseline of customer service. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And it just occurred to me, one thing that I forgot to mention was there's a blood drive here at City Hall on Thursday. I believe it's 10 to noon or 10 to 2, Denise, do you know? It's 10 to 2, so they will take walk-ins. There's a website that you can go in and register on. I think Alex had sent out a notice earlier, so that option's available. So great.
Sorry, I apologize. I have everything written down, and there's a couple of things I forgot to mention. The COG was going to open on May 1st, and I believe that has now been postponed till towards the end of May. So just wanted to let you know that. And the Tree USA flag, we put it up last week down at Shriver, and it's not flying right now because it's bigger than our USA flag. And we've ordered a new USA flag so that they can both fly every day. So I wanted to share that. And then Roy and I and Chief Otto and I met today with several residents with concerns regarding parking, speeding, and those type of things. And so we're managing those as residents call us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we've come to the end of the evening, so if there's no objections, I'll just go ahead and say that we're adjourned. So thanks, everybody. I know this was a lot of work in a short amount of time, so let's hang in there. Cheers. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Good evening.